What's going on, everybody? Sean Ross here. I hope you all are doing well, but this is going to be my review of RWBY Volume 5, Chapter 9, entitled A Perfect Storm. Now, I am really excited just to dive into and talk about what went down in this week's latest chapter of RWBY, because that entire first section with Cinder and company talking with Raven and Vernal, I have been waiting for this section for quite some time, but even though it didn't go quite the way that I actually envisioned it to go down, what I had envisioned was a full-on brawl and a fight breaking out between Cinder and Vernal, a Maiden v Maiden battle. Even though that did not go down, and I was a little bit disappointed by that, the conversation that took place I found to be very interesting, and it's giving us a lot of hints at what might happen and how chaotic these final chapters of Volume 5 are most likely going to be, because as it's kind of being hinted at, the Battle of Haven Academy might be fast approaching and coming a lot faster than I think some of us might have anticipated, because I honestly thought the Battle of Haven might be taking place in Volume 6, but judging by this section alone, I'm thinking that the final chapters of Volume 5, we might see the Battle of Haven take place. So the entire first section, I absolutely loved, and I'm really excited just to dive in and talk about all that went down within that section. But then also, I am really glad that Rooster Teeth did not decide to leave this out of this week's chapter, with Blake and her family fighting against Corsic, Finnick, and the White Fang. I'm really glad, even though those sections were small in this week's latest chapter, that they were in here, because there are some interesting things taking place during this fight with the White Fang. We have Sun and Ghira about to team up and fight up against Corsic and Finnick. I am really looking forward to see how that fight breaks down, what ends up happening, and just getting to see Ghira and Sun actually cooperating is going to be very funny and interesting to see. But that cliffhanger of what's teasing to be the fight between Blake and Ilya, I am really looking forward to if we get it next chapter, because now that Ilya's love for Blake is out in the open, I am really interested to see how Blake handles this situation, but also how Ilya handles this situation, because the way Blake fights in this fight and the way that Ilya fights in this fight is going to determine where this is going to go. And I think this will also determine whether or not, in the fandom's eyes, if Ilya will be redeemable or not. So even though it kind of feels like those are the only two sections within this chapter, a lot went down. So I'm really excited just to dive into those two sections of this week's latest chapter. But even before I do that, guys, I just want to thank you guys for everybody that watched my last chapter review of RWBY. All of your comments, all you guys watching it, it means a lot to me, and that is my most watched RWBY review I have ever done. So right off the bat, I just want to thank you guys so much. I love getting to talk with you guys down in the comments, and I look forward to talking with you guys in all future chapter reviews. So without further ado, let's just go all the way back to the beginning of this week's latest chapter and talk about what went down with our two maidens finally getting to meet. So this week's latest chapter starts us off with Cinder, Watts, Emerald, and Mercury strolling right into Raven's encampment and them seeking word with the leader of the tribe, Raven, and then eventually having Vernal coming in to join in on the conversation, because Cinder and company has come here for the Spring Maiden. And I was honestly expecting a full-on brawl to break out once Cinder and Vernal were going to meet. You know, have a full-on Maiden v Maiden battle, Spring versus Fall, Vernal versus Cinder. I was really expecting that. So even though we did not get that within this section of the chapter, I am honestly thinking that Rooster Teeth is saving that for the ending of Volume 5. But besides that, the entire conversation that took place within this section, I was fully engaged with it. I loved the character interactions with Raven interacting with Cinder, with Watts, with Mercury and Emerald. Everything about this entire conversation, I was just sitting there waiting to see what was going to happen with these two finally getting to meet and having this conversation, because once they end up stating that they're here for the Spring Maiden, Raven calls over Vernal, and this is where we finally get that 100% confirmation that Vernal is the Spring Maiden. So if there were any people still out there that were denying that Vernal was the Spring Maiden, we now have 100% confirmation that she is in fact the Spring Maiden. And I really did like the effects of, you know, just her just forming the storm clouds, the way that they actually formed the animation during that section, I thought was actually very, very good for RWBY standards. But even besides that, the fire that Cinder was creating, displaying her maiden powers, I thought was very cool as well. And I just love the fact that the flame was coming off her eye. It was just a very nice touch to the overall animation during that maiden section. So once Vernal ends up revealing that she is in fact the Spring Maiden, this is where the conversation starts to take a very interesting turn. And this is where I think the crew behind RWBY is starting to lay the groundwork and kind of giving us a bit of hints and clues of what the events are going to look like with the Battle of Haven, but also with the ending chapters of Volume 5. Because right here, Cinder ends up proposing to Raven and Vernal to actually form an alliance. All she wants to do is utilize the Spring Maiden powers, bring her back to Haven Academy, have her unlock the vault, holding the relic, and once they end up getting the relic, they'll go back to Salem, and Raven and Vernal will be left alone. The only problem is, Raven does not trust Cinder, Watts, Emerald, and Mercury, and she definitely does not trust Salem because she knows once they help them to get the relic, they will be destroyed, they will be killed, they will basically be cut out of the way so that way nothing can oppose Salem on her quest to get the rest of the relics. So what she ends up proposing to them, it's like, wait, you guys want to go to Haven Academy where Crow, RWBY, and the gang, all of these people are basically guarding the relic right there. If we were to go in right now, there would be a big battle breaking out. So what they end up letting everyone know is that in 2 days, the White Fang is going to be attacking Haven Academy. And we're basically going to have the Battle of Beacon all over again. And this honestly has me very, very hyped because we're going to have a lot of carnage, a lot of battles. And if this is going to take place with the final chapters of Volume 5, this is going to be awesome to watch. So what they end up proposing is that within 2 days, when the White Fang is about to attack Haven Academy, they are going to use the ensuing chaos of this gigantic battle to sneak Vernal in, get her down to where the vault is, that way they can steal the relic as Haven Academy is reduced to rubble. The only problem is, besides the fact that the White Fang in this ensuing battle is going to be very chaotic, you also have Crow, RWBY, Yang, Weiss, and the rest of Team Juniper, and Oscar, who they don't know is Ozpin. So what Raven ends up proposing to them is that while they are there during this gigantic battle for Haven Academy, they are going to ambush Crow and end up killing Crow throughout this entire battle. So already they are building up the hype for the Battle of Haven Academy, and there's going to be so much chaos ensuing. Not only are they going into ambush and trying to kill Crow, but then you also have the grudge match that is going to be Cinder versus RWBY, because like Emerald states, isn't the girl going to be there? Isn't RWBY there also? So right now, the hype surrounding the Battle of Haven, this is going to be very similar to the Battle of Beacon, but it might be on a much grander scale because we're going to have the White Fang, we're going to have Raven and Vernal, we're going to have Cinder, Watts, Emerald, and Mercury, we're going to have Crow, RWBY, Yang, Weiss, the rest of Team Juniper, Oscar / Ozpin, and then you also got to factor in that the Grimm are most likely going to move in as well. So this is going to get really, really crazy, and the way that this section basically ends off is with a handshake between Cinder and Raven. But what I love about this is that none of these people trust one another. As we can see in a short little section after this, Raven is talking to Vernal, and she is letting her know, I do not trust Cinder, I do not trust Salem in the slightest. Sure, they say that they will leave us be once they get the relic, but they will end up trying to kill us once they end up getting the relic. So there's going to be a lot of backstabbing during this chaotic moment at the Battle of Haven Academy, and I honestly can't wait for it. So even though we did not get the Maiden v Maiden battle, this conversation definitely laid the groundwork for some of the events for the Battle of Haven and what is looking to be a very exciting ending for Volume 5. But that isn't the only section we had within this chapter. We also went back to the Belladonna fight with the White Fang, and this section I absolutely love. And I am really glad that Rooster Teeth decided not to skip the whole Belladonna versus White Fang section this chapter, because if we had to wait till chapter 10 to find out what was going on with this confrontation, I honestly think the fandom would lose their minds, because right now, Ghira and Kali have the most potential during this confrontation to die. You could also say Corsic and Finnick, but on the good guys side, Ghira and Kali have the most potential right now to bite the dust during this confrontation. We don't want that to happen, but if I had to choose between Ghira and Kali, I would choose Ghira over Kali. You can't have the MILF kitty die in this section. But the two fights that are being built up during this last section, I am really looking forward to see how these two fights play out. The first one, seeing Sun teaming up with Ghira about to go up against Corsic and Finnick. I am really curious to see how this is going to play out, but if Sun does really well in this fight, he might actually get into the good graces of Ghira, and Ghira might actually not like look down on him. He might be proud of Sun after this fight. That all depends on if Ghira ends up surviving this fight, which I am hoping he does, because if Sun can get in his good graces, that is a win for Sun. So I am looking forward to that. And if they take out Corsic and Finnick, that just adds to that wonderful moment where Sun is finally in the good graces of Ghira. But the other fight that is kind of like the cliffhanger we are left off with for this week's chapter is Blake about to go up against Ilya. And this I'm very curious about, because the whole character dynamic and the way that these characters interact most likely is going to change, because with the reveal last chapter of Ilya having feelings and loving Blake, I'm very curious to see how Blake will act during this fight, but then I'm also curious how Ilya will act during this fight. And what Ilya does during this whole confrontation with Blake will determine for the fandom whether or not Ilya is in fact redeemable or not. So those two fights I'm really looking forward to right now, but the question still left up in the air: is Kali safe? Because we did not get to see Kali by the ending of this week's chapter, and I am really hoping that she ends up staying alive, because you cannot kill the MILF kitty. You cannot do that at all. So that is basically where we're left off with chapter 9 of volume 5 of RWBY. Overall, majority of this chapter I wasn't really expecting, you know, with the whole Maiden stuff that went down, the whole conversation, the alliance, and everything being built up right now for the Battle of Haven, I am really looking forward to. And then with the tiny sections of the Belladonnas fighting against the White Fang, I really enjoyed. So I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts, theories, and opinions on this week's latest chapter. What are the next chapters going to entail, and where's the story going to go moving forward? What do you guys think about the first section with Cinder and her gang talking with Raven and Vernal? And where do you see the fights going with the Belladonnas versus the White Fang? What's going to happen with Sun and Ghira going against Corsic and Finnick? And what do you think about Blake going up against Ilya? And is Kali still alive? Leave your thoughts down in the comments below, guys. I love you guys so much, and thank you guys so much for the support on my Chapter 8 review. I can't stress it enough, guys. That meant so much to me, and I just love getting to talk to you guys, and I look forward to talking with you guys down in the comments of this video as well. So that was my review for RWBY Volume 5, Chapter 9. Until Chapter 10 of RWBY comes out next weekend, I will talk to you guys then. See you later, guys.